Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the official Oscarina nomination coverage for F-Zero. F-Zero is a science fiction racing game for the Super Nintendo, developed and published by Nintendo. It was released in November of 1990 in Japan, and 1991 in America, and 92 in Europe, and served as a launch title for the console. My name's Mitchell, and I'll be your host for the evening. Here with me is fellow Oscarina voter Tyler. Tyler, thank you for joining me.
Happy to be here.
So F-Zero earned 3 nominations, and they are for Best Pixel for 1990, Best Visual Immersion, and Best Musical Score. And so notably, F-Zero did not secure a gameplay nomination. I'll let you speculate for yourself why this happened. But its realistic shot was going to be for challenge and achievement. If it had managed it, it was just very competitive. That category saw actually the most diversity in terms of games, including 2 games not up for any other award with Super C and UN Squadron. So I think it was just kind of a brutal playground. But that said, I don't know about you, but personally, I think F-Zero got not a bad turnout since it landed the 2 nominations it needed. With a nod in visual immersion and a musical score, F-Zero has the 2 elements you need to make for a great racing experience. The visuals and the music are fantastic and a huge component for just how absorbing this game is to play.
Yeah, I agree. And, I have not played too much of it myself, but I've extensively watched you play and then some other people on YouTube. It's unusual for a racing game. And obviously it looks like it inspires quite a bit of nostalgia for those that grew up with it, which unfortunately I did not, but it seems like a lot of fun for precursors to stuff like Mario Kart and other such titles on Nintendo, but it looks like a lot of fun.
Yeah, and this was also not a childhood pick for me either, but it did push out things like Super Mario World and Super C and a couple others for the best pixel slot. And, we don't, I think, we're not really going to have a bunch of a precedence for racing or sports titles in general, but you've got that little bit of a hint of a science fiction setting with F-Zero, and then coupled with the fact that
It's a visual treat, I would say. It's fun to look
yeah.
at just in general. Like the backgrounds of it is great. The maps are all pretty diverse. You're not too monotonous. It's not too long when you're doing a race. And it feels pretty competitive, even though obviously you're playing against the AI. But I mean, it feels like it's fast paced and adrenaline pumping for sure for what it was.
Yeah, I mean, even today, you can kind of very easily just get sucked into the game. Every time I went to record footage for it, I would be like, okay, I just need maybe 5 minutes, 2 minutes tops to just grab some footage really quick. That's all I need. I just need a quick snapshot. And then like an hour and a half would go by, and I'd be like, oh, that's right. And I can't really say that about too many others on the list from these 2 years.
You
Something
probably
about
couldn't say that about most racing games in general.
Well, I couldn't because I'm not a huge racing fan.
Fair.
But yeah, actually, and that I think that does speak volumes to it, because there's a real contrast too between this game and other racing games from the time. So it's the Super Nintendo's quite liberal use of Mode 7 just gives it that effect where you just feel like you're moving at a lightning fast pace, and nothing else really compares to that, especially if you're comparing like 8-bit, where the pixel rendering is just so much slower, and so you just don't have the same tactile sensation that F-Zero gives you.
Yeah, and that was definitely appealing, even just from a visual spectator perspective. It's it's got a mixture of colors and backgrounds. Like you can see cities in the far off distance and deserts, and they're multicolored and obviously sci-fi inspired rather than realistically. But it provided a something else to go with the racing aspect of the game, because I mean the racing aspect was pretty cool too. It has a lot of interesting little, I don't know, elements within the game, like the little hops that you can do on the they look like a Mario Kart, the arrows that propel you forward, but instead you get to jump with them, and you can jump over certain landscapes to like create your own quote unquote shortcut. So that was pretty neat. And
Yeah.
it didn't push too far outside of its boundaries either. I think that was another
hmm
thing that I liked. Yeah, I felt like in this game, despite whether you, because obviously I watched you play it, you did a couple of recordings, and then I actually went over and just chilled with you while you played, and it was fun because I got to experience music, I got to experience the gameplay, the visuals, and then just seeing how you were adapting with the maps. But I think it kind of encapsulated a philosophy that I like to hold to with most of these things, whether it be a movie or a game or a book or something. It really stuck within its boundaries. Like it's kind of it goes along the lines of less is more. It was just like, nope, this is just a straight racing game. You pick your racer, you jump on the track, and you go, and it's just you're based on your skill. And some of it is very reminiscent of the old school, run through of a game like a Mario or something, where it's very difficult, but once you get that pattern, because inevitably they all have that pattern, once you get that, and you can kind of navigate the turns a little bit easier, you get the idea of how the track is built, then you have more of a chance. Whereas in the beginning, when you start the race, it's a little harder because the AI is obviously a little bit more adept than you are. But at the end, I mean, you can get to the point where you're lapping people and things. It makes it a fun challenge to keep you interested. What map it is, it's like, yeah, you're just gonna race.
Well, like you said, was it beauty is simplicity or something?
There's beauty and simplicity in this game.
Beauty
is
and
definitely
simplicity. Yeah.
Yeah, encapsulates that, and the fact that it's like, you know what you're getting every time. And it'll have obviously its variances to make sure that it's not monotonous, but at the same time, it's still going to maintain its element of fun, which it definitely is.
Yeah, you're touching up on a whole bunch of things. I'm like, where do I hook in at that?
My bad.
Well, I'll try to work my way backwards. Let's say. So for the AI, yeah, they're deliberately as obnoxious as humanly possible, and that is one of the unique things about the design is because you're going pretty fast, and if you can pass up all your competitors, because you only have the other 3 going against you. So it's just the 4 of you, and once you're ahead of them, if they can't catch you because you're not making any mistakes, then you're golden. And that's the ideal position to be in. But what can happen is you're not really liable to make mistakes because of, like you said, you're going to get it into your bloodstream, and then you'll just know what to do. So what they did was they put in those obstacle little bogies that hover around the craft, and they're not actual racers, they're just there to get in your way. And some of them even explode if you bump into them and damage you, because you have like a health meter you have to watch, like dying like from too many errors. That can also just be a complete loss condition. But that's actually good because it prevents you from having to do that situation that you run into in Mario Kart where everyone has passed the race and you're in the back because you just missed a jump and you had to go through another lap all over again or something like that. And so you have to do this drive of shame up to the finish line.
And actually, that was an interesting component too, because I noticed you don't heal except at the very end of the lap. There's that section there where you have to guide yourself into a certain lane in order to heal up, and it's only a certain amount. If you don't stay in the lane long enough, you're not going to get as much health as you could have, and it's never going to really. If you got low enough, it's not going to replenish you completely. So if you're bouncing off walls, or if things are exploding, or if you're hitting other racers and stuff, and you're not able to sit there and heal when you get to the end of that lap, you're in trouble. Like it's a pretty difficult thing not to hit those walls and to deplenish the life that you have.
Yeah, it sort of makes you think about more than just winning the race. And there's no multiplayer component to this either. So it has to, like, all the innovation, all the excitement, it has to be packed into just that single player experience. And so there was clearly a lot of forethought in the design to make sure that it's immersive as possible.
Well, I was going to say, which is probably why the AI was as obnoxious as it could be, so that it didn't become just boring to have them on the field, because otherwise you're just going to be like, well, what's the point of them if I'm just going to be so good that none of them are going to affect me at all?
Well, yeah, and they have... I don't know exactly how it does this, but basically your opponents are like a set distance behind you, and every time you make a mistake, like they catch up immediately. So you can't ever pull this infinite lead over them. Like you'll never lap them. That just won't happen. It doesn't matter if you perform it perfect on the easiest difficulty. That will just... And if you make like a set number of mistakes, depending on how much time it costs you, they will catch up. And so they're always going to be like essentially riding your tail. Um, and this creates like this propelling motion forward. If there's like one word to really sum up the experience of F-Zero, it's that it wants you in constant momentum. And everything from the way that it looks visually, with like the track just like speeding under you, versus or and taking into account the music. The music is very it's kind of like subtle and rhythmic with a lot of percussion, but it just instills that kind of like it like wants you to go 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 go, and so everything is just pushing you just a little bit forward, and it's not rushing you. It's not like a panic sensation. A lot of classical tracks like Mute Zero and Big Blue, or Mute City and Big Blue, they don't, they don't give you that effect, but they do kind of excite you, and they don't sort of draw attention to themselves so much as just kind of ambiently hold the track together.
Yeah, and on the music, it was a lot of fun too. It was just I don't know, it's a very classic, something that would bring up the nostalgia instantly, even if you hadn't played it as a kid. It's got a lot. It's just a fun beat.
Yeah, and the science fiction setting, I think, goes a lot to informing these things, because the environments they have like they take place on all sorts of different planets. It's this galaxy-wide Grand Prix that you're in. And so you can see like there's like one with like a weird plants in the background, or like a weird skull, or like these domes that are some kind of city, some alien city. And then you have that creative liberty because of the setting. And then that also informs the music as well. You're allowed to make it, I guess, a bit more energetic and a bit more unique, because if you're just thinking of any racing music, like racing music, I think is oftentimes will actually just pull like popular music and be like, sure, you want to just listen to this. It's not necessarily like you have to hire a composer to sit down and write music for the thing. Sometimes that happens, but I think that's more rare. When you have a setting like this, though, it really would not work to just take something like that. Like, you have to write something that fits the theme now. And so it's one of those ways that pushes its aesthetic presence just enough so that it can inform the decisions of the design.
Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't thought of it that way, but it is an interesting setting, even though they don't give you much context in the game itself. But that is true. It would force you into being a little bit more creative in what inspires the setting, even without the context given. Because you can tell, obviously, that it's something different, and it's an unusual setting for a racing game. In the latter half of the 20th century, mankind was gripped by the fear of being invaded by extraterrestrials. So a bunch of multi-billionaires went and built these racetracks for their own amusement, essentially. And it's like, it's the year 2560. Due to the human race's countless encounters with alien life forms throughout the universe, Earth's social framework has been expanded to cosmic proportions. So they built this thing to race against each other. So I guess there's a variety of different pilots or something. Does it show that in the game? I don't remember seeing that.
Not really,
because I know you. Okay, so like it's just implied that there's these aliens in these race pods as well. Because you play as Falcon, which we all know, and Super Smash Brothers shows up, and he's this kind of mysterious figure.
Yeah, you can play the other characters. So like, yeah, there's 4 characters mentioned in the instruction manual, and you can play as any of the 4. But you don't really see them. You just see their car. So like, I didn't even know that one of the guys, was like an alien. And he has like some comment in the instruction manual where he's just like I'm not gonna race with like people who bleed red blood or some nonsense like that.
It's an insult to him for people that don't have a matching blood color.
Yeah.
And it goes pretty in detail. Like this book has a comic at the end where I guess Falcon moonlights as a bounty hunter, and he's hunting down these different alien types. So it's very like Star Wars-esque, with a bit of dread mixed in. But
Mm.
The game itself just focuses on the race, which is funny because it's like they're trying to mix in some other interesting concepts of this universe, but like none of that you would imply from the game, from how it's played or what you experience. You just kind of get a different view, a different planet, a different racetrack, and that's about it. And obviously
Yeah,
the ships are like these spaceship-esque race cars, and
yeah, they're
they're
like
pretty neat. They're very
hovercrafts.
like,
Hmm.
yeah, they're like 50s, 60s style art that they've got in here. The book is itself is pretty fun to go through, just because it's super simple. They don't like overload you with a bunch of lore and stuff. It's just kind of wacky fun that they put together, but it gives it an extra bit of context that makes the game a little bit more enjoyable, a little more interesting.
Yeah, yeah. So like we don't have a competitive category for instruction manuals because it's uh, part of the setup for the categories is I wanted it to be so that you could take a game from 1990 and a game from 2020, and they could reasonably have competed in the same categories. Like you should be eligible to participate in every category. So it's one of those things where
Hmm.
if F Zero had taken the time to like incorporate like some story cutscenes or something like that, then it then becomes eligible for narrative composition and best character and these kinds of categories as well. And that's kind of the one gripe though with it. It's cool that they do have it in the instruction manual to provide that context and to kind of set the theme, the tone before you start playing. But it's not incorporated into the game, and it's sort of a give and take. On the one hand, it's a bit unfortunate because it sort of saps the kind of story elements that we definitely look for, but at the same time, it allows them to focus entirely on just the raw play experience. And
Hmm.
keep in mind the other reason why it's in for visual immersion is just the performance of it. I mean, this game runs like absolute butter. And while it's not like the most important facet of it, it is relevant to the engineering element of it to make sure that the game performs well because it's hard to have an artistic experience if it doesn't really even run the way that it should. And so that was another thing that just made it all the more impressive. It was very much something designed so that way they could sell the Super Nintendo, be like, okay, you have to get a Super Nintendo because you have to get this game. This is something that can't be achieved on previous gen hardware. And that all makes sense, but it does feel like they went the extra mile and a half to just really include all that rich detail in the background lore. And like I said, it doesn't come up in the game, or at least not that I'm aware of. I haven't beat it on the harvest difficulty. Maybe you get something then. Um, but to my knowledge, it doesn't show up. But it does show up in the sense that it subtly informs all the decisions that the developers took in constructing it. And for that, I think it's really commendable.
And obviously, it had an influence on the design. I mean, like I said, you have those different planets and racetracks and things. Um, but it is nice to know that, regardless of whatever inhibited them from putting it in the game, which I'm assuming were multiple reasons like budget or time or who knows, it looked like a pretty, for its time, pretty advanced type of gameplay, or a different type of gameplay, which in itself requires a number of resources that I'm sure prevented them from adding in everything they wanted to the game itself. But it's nice to know that they threw in something extra just to kind of give you an idea of what was going through their heads when they created the thing. So it's cool to have, as little as it is. I mean, it's like a page long of the little backstory thing in the book, and then they have like a mini comic to show what else Falcon does aside from racing. But it was
Mhm.
fun just to kind of look through and understand what the concept was behind it. And it, like I said, it gave it a little bit more enjoyability when you're playing the game because you knew what it was.
Mhm.
It's a fun game because sci-fi is always wonderful.
Yeah, I mean that helps. But I mean, surely it does help because it kind of is like Like if there was an F-Zero 2 on Super Nintendo,
Mhm.
I mean, you could add those other story moments, but the core gameplay and the music and the visuals, I don't really see that changing much. I mean, there's probably a few things they could have done, like some more tracks that might have implemented some more interesting mechanics. They might have been able to push the hardware a little bit further to do a few more things. But I feel like for what it is, for being at the very start of the system's launch, I mean, it pushes itself really far. Like you wouldn't, if you didn't know that this was at the beginning, you'd probably assume it was at the end. I would think in most cases because it just is so polished. And there's something to be said for that. Just eliminate the distractions. Don't get caught up trying to incorporate something that's not going to work, and just zero in on just getting that raw quality down.
And they did a great job. It does run really smoothly, and it's a fast pace. Like you said, it just kind of keeps that rhythm.
I think we've covered probably most things. Did you have any other final comments on the music?
I would just suggest that whenever you get a chance, go and listen to it. It's a lot of fun. It's one of those things like I'm listening to it right now, just gonna have it playing, and it's I don't know, it just kind of gets your head moving, gets your feet tapping. Like it's just fun, the whole thing through. It doesn't have a lot of depth. It doesn't have like a lot of emotion. It's just kind of like this is what you'd expect from a 1990s sci-fi racing game. But I mean, it encapsulates it perfect. So I recommend a listen through.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's totally befitting of what you're doing in a way that's just, yeah, it's chef's kiss, as we say.
And as it says on the, it has the game art here on the CD cover, I guess is what it is, and it says the race of the 26th century. It's perfect. It's just fun.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, and something else that's really awesome about the final stage is you get to the last track and it has a completely unique visual style from any of the others. And it's also one of the longest and one of the toughest stages. It has its own musical theme to go with it. And my favorite part about it is that when you get to the end of there, you can veer off course just a bit, and then it speed boosts you right over the finish line. So it's just a nice way to use some aesthetic choices to coalesce into a massive crescendo at the end. Yeah, so I think that's probably going to call it there. I think we're sort of exhausting things to talk about because this experience is really one that is, as much as we can describe it in words, you really just need to experience it for yourself. I think the sensation of just like with a controller in your hands and going through the motions of getting into your bloodstream, or even just watching somebody else play it, I think that's really where the game shines best. And I think it's rather than butcher it too long by just trying to distract with a video, we'll kind of call it here and let you make your own decision from there. So F-Zero is a one-of-a-kind racing game that is well worth experiencing today, and you can do so by hunting down an original cart, or you can access it online via Nintendo Switch Online. If you're a voter, I hope you'll consider F-Zero at this year's Oscarinas come this October. So thank you, Tyler, for joining me. It's been fun.
Thanks for having me.
That.
Absolutely.
And thank you, everyone else, for joining us as well. And I'll just leave you with our closing sentiment. If F-Zero wins Best Pixel, it will stress the power of play from the viscerally engaging experience found in one of the finest racers in gaming.